All right, everyone. If you could please take your seats. So we've already called the meeting to order and been to executive session, and now we're back. Is it not picking me up? So I want to begin by acknowledging the many emails, phone calls, and conversations that I've received over the past 2 weeks, expressing anger, disappointment, and frustration with school committee members, particularly around comments made at our last meeting about readiness to discuss materials and vote. December 4th was a significant moment in our overall AB Forward process. It marked the first of 4 meetings that the full school committee will have to deliberate and vote. Per open meeting law, we can only do this during our public posted meetings. It was also the formal handoff from a subcommittee to the full school committee, and as is often the case at that juncture, members were in different places. Some had spent months immersed in the work, asking questions, attending meetings, and for AB Forward members, deliberating in depth. Others were engaging more fully for the first time, having intentionally waited until the full committee received more developed materials to begin their own analysis. Both approaches are legitimate, and both are consistent with our roles and responsibilities. And I also want to acknowledge that there were some tense moments in our remarks as our different approaches became evident during our conversation. This is hard work. It's difficult to discuss publicly in the heat of the moment, as anyone who's stepped up to that microphone knows. And I hope we can all give each other a little grace, because we are here for the same reason. We all care deeply about the education of our students. What unites the members here is not that we all enter discussions at the same point, or even that we all agree, because we don't, but that every school committee member is responsible for making an independent, informed judgment that serves every student within the resources of our community. We do not represent only our own school communities, our social circles, or even individual towns. We represent the district as a whole. The decisions before us affect approximately 2,400 elementary school students, their families, and more than 500 staff, both now and for years to come. I have spoken with every member of this committee, and I can say with complete confidence that each is taking this responsibility seriously and is committed to the depth of preparation that this work demands. And I'll pause here in case any of my colleagues want to add any comments. Vikram.
I would just like to make a general comment. Last week, I said some things that seemed flippant and off the cuff, specifically that I'm not being paid to be here, which I'm not. But I want to make it very clear that I work very hard at this. Frequently, I'm up at 4 in the morning worrying about all this stuff and all the stuff that we have to do. It's a lot of stuff going on here. And, you know, it takes its toll emotionally, physically. There's a lot going on. It's very stressful. So I apologize if anybody misinterpreted what I said or took it the wrong way. I did not mean to be flippant. I don't take this position lightly by any measure. People who know me well will attest to that. So I just wanted to say that and issue a general apology for the way I worded things last meeting. Thank you.
All right, so before we move on to public comment, just some bits of instruction so that everybody knows what's going on here. As I mentioned before, we can't do this work behind closed doors. We have to do it here. Under open meeting law, our deliberations have to be in public view, so decisions are made transparently, and so you can witness them as they unfold. And that is why we are genuinely glad you are all here tonight. It's also why this evening, public comment is going to be limited to 15 minutes. We as a committee need time to talk through the issues before us together. There will be an extended 75-minute public forum on January 8th, closer to our final vote, to allow additional community input once members have had a chance to deliberate. So to give everybody a sense, because last time we had people who were prepared to make much longer comments and were not ready to be shorter, let's do this now. The public comment period for AB Forward will be later, but let me see just a show of hands about how many people are thinking they might want to make a public comment tonight. 26. Okay, so we're counting about 26. So think about that math for a moment. Let me toss one other thing out to consider. It's entirely possible that we might have a vote tonight to remove one or more options from consideration. We're not going to vote to select an option, but to remove some. If that happens, my proposal to the committee would be that we have the conversation, we do our deliberation, and then like the steering committee did, we table it. We go to public comment so that if we have people who want to say something specifically about the options that we are proposing to eliminate, they have that opportunity. And my proposal to everybody who's thinking about wanting to comment tonight would be to consider letting the people who want to comment specifically on the vote that we might potentially be taking be the first ones in that line, so that we have the opportunity to hear from you before we move. And I don't know that that's going to happen. I just thinking through what this might look like and setting some possibilities here. That said, you should see some papers out there. There are other ways to provide full comments. So if you came with 3 minutes worth of comments and with 26 people and 15 minutes,
30 seconds.
We're looking at 30 seconds. You can email us your public comment. You can submit it to the AB Forward public comment form, which is why we set that up, so that you have this physical form that will collect all of your comments. That gets to the committee. It gets published on our agenda so that other people can see them as well. So those are kind of the primary means if you have extensive comments and you don't have the opportunity to give them to us this evening. So let's just see where this goes. We'll think about that when we get there, but just to set some expectations, plan for short comments, please. So that said, we do have a section here for public participation that is not related to AB Forward. So other stuff on our agenda, stuff that is not on the agenda but is related to the school committee, that would be appropriate now. Per school committee policy BEDH, members of the public are invited to speak for up to 3 minutes. Public participation will only take place at this time during our meeting, with the exception of AB Forward. Speakers must be recognized by the chair before speaking, and the committee does not typically respond to comments during public participation. Do we have any non-AB Forward related public comments this evening? All right. Seeing none. Peter, Superintendent's update.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to keep this very brief because I know we want to maximize time being able to allow you to talk. But the primary focus, I just want to share all of our district's very sincere appreciation for the generosity shown by our community during this year's AB Resource Center Holiday Gift Drive. We're equally grateful to all of the volunteers whose donations, time, and dedication brought that effort to life. Through this collective support, we were able to gather an abundance of toys, clothing, essential items, helping to brighten the holidays for 92 families and 206 children with comfort, joy, and care. That is a huge undertaking, so congratulations to the Resource Center for all of that work, and with much gratitude to all of the members of our community. For those who celebrate, we wish you a joyful Hanukkah and a meaningful Kwanzaa and a Merry Christmas. I also wish everyone a restful and rejuvenating break and a very Happy New Year.
All right, so moving on to subcommittee assignments, school committee assignments and subcommittees. We have a recommendation to add Liz Fowlks to the Capital Subcommittee.
Moved.
Second.
So that was moved by Lisa, seconded by Vikram. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that is unanimous. Thank you. Sherry has provided us an update on OPEB in the packet. Does anybody have any questions for Sherry? All right. And Adam.
I just have a quick comment, which is the highlights of the OPEB packet say that amongst our similar-sized communities and districts, we're doing an excellent job of saving for future expenses related to post-employment benefits for our employees. So just want to highlight that there's some great financial management happening there for our retirees.
Thank you. All right, Andrew, personnel report? Anybody have questions for Andrew?
Typical monthly personnel report, not a lot of shifts, but if you end up having questions, you can feel free to contact me.
All right, in record time, we have made it to the AB Forward update and continued discussion. So before handing this over to Peter, I want to acknowledge some of the very real tensions we are holding as a committee. Tensions we're hearing clearly in letters, emails, and in the broader community conversation. We're balancing the district's long-term sustainability, whether you look at that from financials, staffing, educational quality, with the amount of change we're asking families, students, and educators to accept in a short time. We are balancing how disruption is distributed, while hearing deeply from families and staff who feel uniquely targeted, displaced, or made to feel less than as we imagine next year's school communities. We are balancing pride in our school identities and educational philosophies with the recognition that some narratives around rankings, labels, or fit can feel exclusionary and can echo in ways that our children experience directly. We are balancing the needs and perspectives of both Acton and Boxborough, communities of different sizes and changing demographics within the shared responsibilities of a regional district. We are also holding tensions around what equity means, whether it is sameness, fairness, or meeting students where they are, between preserving stability now and avoiding repeated ad hoc disruption later, between honoring feelings, real feelings of loss, and working within structural constraints, and between the community's desire for clarity and the sequencing realities of decision-making, including the timelines required by our legal and budget obligations. And finally, we are balancing the pull of the status quo, what is familiar, what has worked for many, with the possibility and the risk of building something new, while asking not only what is most comfortable for the majority, but what best serves every student over time. None of these tensions are abstract. They are deeply human, and they matter. And our task tonight is not to deny them, but to hold them with care, honesty, and respect as we continue this difficult work together. Peter, can you show the dignity index, please? So 2 years ago, when I went to the Association of School Committees meeting, Tim Shriver addressed us and talked about this idea called the dignity index. And it's a way of thinking about how our public discourse goes so that we can have real conversations with each other and actually listen and hear each other in a way that we can build paths forward instead of finding ourselves completely polarized. And I want to be clear, nobody is saying we shouldn't have free speech. Our First Amendment rights absolutely apply. But thinking about how we talk to each other really matters. It's not about agreeing, it's about really listening and understanding. And so I want to read these out loud, and then I'm going to ask everybody, as I read them out loud, think about the number that kind of represents how you're experiencing this now. And I don't mean by like necessarily majority of comments, but it just might be how you're kind of feeling like the tone is. So starting with the side of dignity. An 8, each of us is born with inherent worth, so we treat everyone with dignity no matter what. 7, we fully engage with the other side, discussing even values and interests we don't share, open to admitting mistakes or changing our minds. 6, we always talk to the other side, searching for the values and interests we share. 5, the other side has a right to be here and a right to be heard. They belong here too. And then on the other side, Tim Shriver talks about this as this is kind of the side where we're tending towards contempt and it gets hard to have a conversation with each other. 4, we're better than those people. They don't really belong. They're not one of us. 3, we're the good people and they're the bad people. It's us versus them. 2, those people are evil and they're going to ruin everything if we let them. It's us or them. 1, They're not even human. It's our moral duty to destroy them before they destroy us. So I will tell you that I've seen commentary ranging from a 2 to a 7. Like, we are all over the place right now. If you're willing, this is not a vote, but if you're willing to just kind of share with the room how you're experiencing this, use your hands, hold up a number of fingers. How are you feeling about this? I see some 4s and some 5s. I see a lot of 4s and 5s. There's a 7, some 5s. I see a 7. Okay. Anybody feeling 2s or 1s? We're not ready to share that yet? Okay, I know those are out there, right? So just something to think about. Like, we are all here because we believe in the same big thing. We would not be in this room if we didn't care. And we're going to figure this out, and we're going to have a conversation, and we're going to learn some stuff because Peter has a lot to share with us.
Okay, so as we start this dialogue, I just want to, highlight a couple of things. One, the school committee came to us at the last meeting and had a series of questions and requests for information. And what we tried to do was do our best to listen to all those various requests and then come back with additional information. We developed a relatively extensive packet of that, and hopefully you felt as though that was responsive to a lot of the questions that you had. I'm going to go through a lot of that material. Andrew's going to jump in when we get to enrollment options. We're going to go through this at a very high level, not as a replacement for the packet that we put out, but really just as a refresher, because I know there was a lot of information in there, and I think it will be helpful to guide that conversation. I just want to stress that, the analysis we did is not intended to replace any other data point that you've been looking at, including community feedback. It is simply an analysis based on the questions that you asked. We tried to come back to you with the information that was responsive to that. So to dive in, 4 overarching elements or parameters to the options that are on the table. One is around school buildings and closures, and the recognition that all 4 remaining options consider the closure of the Miriam School and the Conant building. We have a staffing model that has been proposed, which reduces 11 K-6 classrooms, and we want to make sure that everyone's aware that that increases our class size to the upper end of school committee guidelines, and at 3 grade levels, we are 1 student beyond school committee guidelines. There is a projected first-year financial savings that ranges between about around 1.9 million, depending on the option. Some models that we've proposed may be more flexible over time if the community continues to experience budget shortfalls. And then really a lot of the focus is on how do we manage the impact of the work that we're doing. And all of the options range to the degree to which students are either displaced or disrupted. And in the packet, I really tried to define some key terms just so we had common language. There's no right way to approach this. I made up a way, which is why I defined it. I considered students being displaced as that student has lost their school. They cannot return to the same school that they are in currently. I defined disrupted as the student may have lost a school building or there's some other very significant disruption, but the school that they have will somehow still exist. And then I talked about this idea of impacted, recognizing that in many of the scenarios, many of our students are somehow impacted because they might be in larger classes, they might have new peers coming into classes, there might be a new teacher in their building, and that there's some type of kind of tertiary impact to a lot of what we're talking about. So I just wanted to shed light on how I chose to define terms before we jumped into this. Just as a reminder, the 4 options on the table, I'm not going to go into all of the details of these, but option 1, which is 3 version 2, is to close Miriam. We also have an option that merges both the Miriam and McT communities, which is in effect the closure of both of those schools, and then they get reconstituted with about half of the student body. Option 5V2 is a hybrid grade band model where we essentially have two large buildings, but we make them smaller by considering upper and lower grade bands. And then option 6 is just to create two large schools in Acton that are both K-6 entities of about 1,000 students each. In both options 5V2 and 6, Blanchard remains largely as it is now by the nature of the size of the school and the nature of kind of the community agreement that we have between Boxborough and Acton. There are two main pathways to all of this. One is a pathway of targeted disruption, and that is options 3V2 and 4. And the goal of those two is to preserve as much stability for the majority of the district by concentrating the disruption in either one or two specific school communities. That's the intent of those. The intent of Path 2, which is systemic reorganization, represented in options 5V2 and 6, is to embrace a broader disruption as an opportunity to reset. There can be a lot of disagreement about which has value, but that's the essential message behind these two options that are still there. I'm just going to highlight some of how we looked at these options. One lens was through student disruption, so the next few slides are just talking about the level of disruption. In a model that closes the Miriam school. The enrollment at Miriam represents 15.8% of our school district, and so you see 15.8% losing a school or being displaced, 16.4% being disrupted because the Conant building won't exist next year and they would be moving into a new building for them. And then the rest of the students in the district are somehow impacted by it, but not as directly as those two school communities. Also, along this first pathway is the idea of merging Miriam and McT. In this one, I have 33% of the elementary population is displaced because both the Miriam and McT schools no longer exist as they currently do. We would have space for about half of that student body in the existing building. The other half would need to be dispersed into other schools. There continues to be disruption to the Conant community because they are losing their building and they would be moved into the adjacent space from one of those two schools. And then what you see is the remainder being impacted kind of with a tertiary or third level of impact. The next two talk more about the broader concept of disruption. This is shown a little bit differently because it shows two different displacement numbers. This is where what you choose to do as a school committee around your enrollment policies has a significant impact. There is one model where if we kept all of the students where they are, then the Conant community would be the one that would end up having to be moved into other buildings because largely we would go under the assumption that most students currently in the Parker Damon building would want to remain there. Even though the schools no longer exist, there's no more Miriam, there's no more McT, the communities there stay largely intact and Conant students would move into the available spaces across the remaining 4 elementary schools. On the other end of it, you asked us to come back with options that looked at both geography and looked at the idea of a re-lottery process. In those, I estimated the disruption at about 70%, or displacement of students at about 70%. It's 70% largely because Blanchard does not get displaced because of the hometown agreement that we have with Boxborough, so we assume most students in Boxborough stay where they are. That takes a significant percentage of the population off, and we also know that just statistically, if we did either a re-lottery or geography, we're probably looking at 20% of a population at least that would end up in the same school that they're in. So that upper end is very much an estimate. There are no guarantees there, but it was the best thinking I had at the time. And in terms of the idea of a large K-6 model, it's the identical impact of that, where it's really based on the enrollment model that the school committee chooses to move forward with. This is just a comparison across them. I'm not going to spend any time. I already just talked you through the whole thing, but it's here in case we need to come back to it for further discussion. I just want to recognize that. And then, Andrew, why don't I turn it over to you to talk about enrollment options?
Sure. So in a moment, we're going to review it as sort of we previewed in that packet, a range of actual enrollment procedures. What I would say ahead of this is the part that I don't want to use the word easiest, but I think is the most linear is the mechanics of enrollment placement. However, I think what probably needs to come attached to this and certainly either happen in conjunction or even ahead of time is sort of the broader questions that I appreciate a lot of the emails that we're getting are really trying to orbit around is the educational decisions that you're going to need to make first. Meaning, A, do you feel that some type of choice model is still a model that you want to continue? And if so, how does that look? B, if you feel like you want to go to a setting where you are asking schools to reconstitute, say in option 5V or 2, what are they allowed to reconstitute into? I.e., are there parameters where there could be significant and noticeable differences between schools and therefore a choice does make sense in terms of family options? Or are we at a place where we want to provide more guidance centrally, consistency, certain areas where we feel like regardless of which school you might be enrolled in, there are things that will not be different? And to what degree do you want that to be significant, or to what degree do you want that to be more limited? Because I think in some ways, if you did want to offer a continued choice model in 5E2, I think that begs the question, well, what are we choosing between and why? And if you don't feel like you want to continue a choice model, does that lead you in a certain direction? So I say that not to suggest that you go in a certain direction. I would just say before we even get into the mechanics of the re-enrollment, those are things that really require more clarity and definition around by the committee so that we can adjust. The mechanics of it, they all will have some level of human challenge and difficulty and emotion, but the actual mechanics of it are not going to be that difficult. You can tell us to prioritize certain things. You can tell us to deprioritize certain things. We'll create the system. It's just really about how you want to emphasize certain goals, certain priorities, certain values within that process. So that being said, clearly within 3V2 and option 4, where it's either the closure of Miriam or what's perceived as a merge, but we understand it's not really a merge between McCarthy 10 and Miriam, those mechanics are a bit sort of more straightforward in terms of identifying the population of students who would need to be transferred and placed either at a different location or be identified as remaining in their current building. Those are outlined in their packet, and those are, at least from a mechanic standpoint, pretty straightforward. However, if we get to the option about 5V2 or 6, where we are clearly identifying a direction where we are moving towards a different construction of at least a few schools, there are 3 avenues, big picture, that could be adjusted and tweaked, but they are, A, we know in this model that Conan students at the very least would have to be transferred from their current school to some version that we create. That would be something where the current students who are currently in the Boardwalk and in the Parker Damon, they would physically stay in those buildings for the most part, with the one caveat being that if and when we determine specialized program placements, that's a big asterisk. But that aside, they would remain, and then Conan students would join the 3 different existing communities. What those communities are, again, goes back to that educational landscape question that you need to answer. That, again, sort of is a little bit like option 3V2 and 4, where the process itself is a little bit more contained in terms of sheer scope. Certainly not more contained in terms of impact on the students themselves, but in terms of the actual mechanics, a bit more narrow. Then you could, as people have tried to sort of wrestle with what ideas they have around if we are reimagining things, how do we ask people to share the load or the burden or the opportunity, if you will, to move in this direction? And some would posit that the most appropriate way to reset would be to engage in initial relottery of all students. And so therefore there is not the impact there's not a direct correlation between closure of a physical space and whether you need to bear the brunt of a relocation and a restructuring. And so therefore we create these new structures, these new school communities, and then we engage the entire community in some type of process for relottery. In this system, if you went there, you would either have to reaffirm certain priorities in the lottery, because that is still an open enrollment model, for purposes that you're going to need to identify. But even once you identify them, you then need to say the following things. Do we still feel like walking distance and proximity to schools should still be a priority, as one example? So you're going to still need to identify what are things that may or may not lead to certain individuals having priority placement at any of these locations as we do the relottery. Clearly, we are also dictated by the hometown guarantee, or as we propose, probably shifting it to a hometown priority by necessity. And so if we reaffirm that, that also provides and dictates some of the mechanics of it all. But again, within that, we can soften the edges in certain ways that you feel would be appropriate. And that, of course, the devil's going to be in the details for a lot of people. And then finally, depending on where you again land with educational landscape and purpose and scope of the schools and how we want to either have expectations of similarity or not and encourage choice or not, is geography-based framework. So we could shift to what's most municipalities and school districts have, which is a geography-based framework where it's based on residents, and you create zones that within the community, and based on your residents, you would be assigned to selected elementary schools. You'd either be Blanchard, whatever permutation of Boardwalk, and whatever form Parker Damon would be in. What we would encourage and strongly recommend is a system that is similar to other school districts, where you identify fairly generous flex zones, where, depending on a variety of variables, if you lived in a flex zone, you may be assigned to not necessarily one of all three schools, but perhaps one of two schools that get designated for your flex zone. This is important for the piece that we don't want to lose the ability to sort of right-size schools for class sizes, enrollment, services, and things like that. You can clearly create still sort of caveats to say, if you're in a flex zone and you already have an older sibling in school X, we would still honor that for a younger sibling if they're still in the school. You could still do that. But in addition to that, you would still have, within certain neighborhoods, the flexibility of the district to say, given our projected class size in a certain grade or area, we're assigning you to one of these two schools. In order to do this, typically, when schools do rezone their neighborhoods, there are organizations that have expertise in this. I think our recommendation would be that we engage with them sooner than later. I think we have general ideas, giving them the contours and the priorities that we have about how to create the zones, and yet they would be the ones who would work with us to actually facilitate the creation of that. So if you decide to do that, we would need to engage with them fairly quickly in order to facilitate this process in that regard. Again, in all of these, I just want to note that the special education services piece is still an important variable. I will note for the geography-based framework, that would be something where if you are assigned to a specialized program to receive the services that you're required to have, that would be one example where, even if you are in a certain zone, the specialized program and school assignment that would be attached to that would override that piece. So you would be someone who could be in a zone where, quite frankly, to be blunt, your neighbors are attending school A, you might be attending school B. And then we would obviously have to work out the details about whether we give your sibling the choice to stay in the neighborhood school or you go with your sibling school, all those details that can be worked out, but those are certainly variables that we need to work on, and they're easy to implement. The harder part is certainly deciding how do we feel about the impact on the creation of school communities. So the mechanics themselves, we can work on them, we can tweak them. The things that we present are simply sort of the general contours of them. I know the details matter, but I think the details will only be born from once you make decisions around the landscape piece. What is the guidance and sort of direction you want to give our team around how these schools may be fashioned once a decision is made. And certainly I'm talking about option 5 or 6 in that regard. Do you feel that we are at a place where we need to have more similarity in certain features of school community and school identity regardless of school? If so, what are those areas? And if they are significant, then that begs the question about what is the purpose and scope of open enrollment. If you feel like there is still an importance to having a broad continuum of educational approaches that offer sort of some remnant of open enrollment, then what does that look like as well? And to keep in mind that if you do, and please know that I don't say this to try and discourage it, but I do think one of the pieces that this process has necessarily surfaced is, again, sort of the benefits and inherent drawbacks of an open enrollment system is that as a school district, as a public school district that doesn't have full flexibility, we can't shrink and expand a school based on interest. And so what has happened over time, not at any particular school in general, but what happens over time is if there are schools that tend to have at any given point in time a great deal of interest, more interest than spaces, you will have always historically had families who don't get choice or don't get what they want. And so if you continue to have an open enrollment system, which again has a lot of benefits, there are families who feel so fortunate and come to Acton-Boxborough because of that opportunity. That is a wonderful thing to be cherished and valued, because I think it allows families to feel a sense of connection and value in terms of their child's education. What accompanies that naturally is that you will inherently have, given just our inability to, again, shrink and flex, you will have a cohort of families who will then be placed at a school that they may either, at best, be indifferent about, at worst, be really disappointed that they are at a school that runs counter to perhaps what they feel is the education that their children, that you want for their children. So that's just the trade-off. I'm not giving that as a value statement. I'm just simply saying that's the reality that has always been the case. We just, for whatever reason, have never sort of really surfaced that in conversations. We've kind of touted, for good reason, the benefits of open enrollment. Never really sort of had reason or purpose to sort of say, and by the way, here's the underbelly of it. Now we do. And of course, it's in a shortened period of time, and it's a stressed period of time. So that's the challenge. It's too bad. If we could go back in the Wayback Machine and sort of highlight and educate everybody about the pros and cons and the natural sort of elements of open enrollment and what it means and what it doesn't mean. I think we could have done that, and it might have benefited, but we're not. So we're in a different place. So with that, happy to entertain sort of wonderings or thoughts, clarifying questions, or not at all.
All right, so a few additional things. One, we just wanted to clarify what does fall into these. There is the core staffing model across all 4 options is very, very similar. And that includes the reduction of 11 classroom sections, which is both classroom teachers and assistants that go with it. The number of assistants is lower because we don't have assistants in all of the upper grade classrooms. And so you see some variation there. It also reduces 1 each of art, music, physical education, and library. Simply because the roles would not be required in terms of the number of sections that we would have in the school district. And then the last one was the proposal to reduce 1 instructional coach, because we have 6 right now. We'd be going down a building. So that's 1.0 FTE. Gabby will talk more at your first meeting in January about structures within teaching and learning. So we're not getting into depth of that tonight. There are also administrative structures that change. I didn't go into detail on this in terms of administration, but there is a slight difference in how option 6 is structured versus the rest of the options, where option 6 goes down 3 principals but has to go up an assistant principal to do that. That's why you see a little bit of variation from option 5V2 to 6. The details of all of that and the actual spreadsheets were published in the packet, so you could get that detail, but I just wanted to highlight a little bit of that for you. We also had a request to review some of the operational considerations. We talked this through with our principals to make sure that we had a good building-based view on this. In terms of the overall school schedules, the ability to run our specialized programs in all of our schools and the specials, art, music, PE, and library that we have, there is minimal impact on our ability to offer those to all of our students. All of our school schedules and all of the buildings are designed to accommodate the number of sections that are proposed to go in them. I think that there will be some impact in terms of lunch and recess, simply because there'll be more students on the playgrounds and in the lunchrooms at times. It's not a furniture problem because we actually have the furniture at Conant that could be repurposed in the other buildings to account for the student population. What we would need to do is provide some additional supervision in the form of assistance during those lunch and recess hours in particular. And so that's something we are considering and planning for in our budget proposal for next year. Extended day could become a little bit more challenging. Extended day, our ability to offer seats in extended day is a function of both space and staffing. Staffing could be moved, but if we don't have appropriate larger spaces, it may become somewhat of a limiting factor for how many seats we can offer in our own extended day program, and we want to be fully transparent about that is likely to be somewhat impacted. We won't know fully until we get into it, but one of the limiting factors right now with how we run extended day is they really prefer the large spaces because they can pool a larger number of kids into those spaces and use their staff really wisely to be able to provide appropriate supervision. If we disperse all the students into classrooms, you actually need higher staffing ratios, which then drives up cost to the program, but ultimately that means it's cost to families because the program is not funded by the district. So just keep that in mind, and that's why it becomes a limiting factor. In terms of parking, we wanted to just call this out over at either Parker Damon and Blanchard. We would have sufficient space, mostly because Blanchard is proposed, the increase in enrollment actually isn't proposed to go any higher than the highest Blanchard has been at historically. So we've already seen what that looks like and we've lived that experience. But at Boardwalk, we would be going right at the max of the enrollment design of Boardwalk. So we anticipate there will have to be heavier use, particularly of that auxiliary lot across the Boardwalk. So we just want to call that out. It was designed for that purpose, but I think there's definitely, I've done it myself, there's a lot of convenience to being able to park right at the campus as opposed to having to go from the Elm Street lot. So want to be transparent about that impact as well. One of the things we were asked to do was to kind of create a one-pager assessment of alignment of each of the options with the strategic priorities that were in the plan. And again, I want to call out that this doesn't replace any other form of feedback that the district has gotten. And when we talked about this as a leadership team, this was how we saw the various options playing out with regard to strategy. I think one of the reasons that option 5V2 continued to come out across all of these, and we can talk about this more in January when Gabby talks about teaching and learning, but when you have a larger number of sections at a grade level and you're operating 6 and 7 sections at a grade level in a school as opposed to 2, or even 3 sections at a grade level, there's a lot of different and creative ways that you can deliver services to students who need them. That includes our multilingual learners. It includes students with disabilities and the ability to be more thoughtful around what inclusion looks like across more classrooms. It also includes both reading and math support, how you might group students, and actually extend the number of students that our specialists could see when you see more grade level. Some of our leaders also noted that there's been a lot of history in many of our current schools around collaboration among educators, and being able to actually have larger collaborative groups among educators could be a real benefit to schools. I think in terms of sustainable systems, the leadership team, many people also saw that if we need to expand or contract in the future, having more classrooms at grade levels allows us to mitigate the impact of that expansion or contraction, either way, over time, whereas in the smaller schools, that was a lot more challenging. I think, option 6 jumped up in terms of sustainability there, simply for that reason. I think one of the things I heard a lot of concern about in option 6 was really, given kind of the long-time culture of our schools, making sure our administrators could spend the face time that they need to with staff, with families, and with kids. So, we think that, I think overall were the summary of comments that I heard, and certainly can come back to questions on that. And so this is just a reminder that there really are two kind of critical pathways to be considering. One is this path of kind of targeted disruption, and I don't mean targeted at any individuals, but targeted in focusing the disruption and trying to keep it small, even though that will be an intense disruption around either one or two school communities, or thinking more in terms of systemic reorganization and looking more broadly at an opportunity for reset. And whichever way you go, there are 4 viable options on the table that we can do. Each one has benefits and trade-offs that are likely perceived differently by various members of the community. So happy to answer any questions, and you can also ask Andrew any questions at this time.
Okay, so let's think about how we do this before we start raising our hands. I'd like to give everybody a chance to speak, comment or question that you have. And sometimes we get into going back and forth. Let's not do that. This is going to be complicated. We might end up to the point where we're going to have to be doing some Robert's Rules stuff. So try and keep this as clean as we can. So I'll just kind of look around, and if you're not ready, that's okay. Help me come back to people if I miss them, okay? Anyone want to start us off? Vikram.
All right, let me see here. So I should say, by the time I graduated high school, I had gone to, I think, 11 different schools. I was sort of the equivalent of an Army brat as an intellectual brat. My father was a visiting professor. And so I've seen a lot of schools. I've been in a lot of schools. I'm very cognizant of the disruptions that occur when you're moving from here to there to here to there to here to there. Andrew Schwartz had written something. I don't know if I should read this in its entirety. No.
No, you should not.
All right.
So,
Yeah, okay. I just want to say one.
So just a point of order here.
Yeah.
So we have a member who's unable to attend because he's traveling. He has submitted some notes for the committee to consider. They will be in the minutes. We will not be reading them aloud.
No, I
Thank
just
you.
want to allude then to one thing that he said, which is data has shown that keeping a K-6 model is really beneficial for students. Breaking things up is actually very detrimental. I also feel that this argument that, well, some people are being disrupted and that's not fair, so really everybody should be disrupted, seems to me sort of just deeply illogical on the face of it. I mean, disrupting all these children, we all have gardens, you grow things, right? Things are growing well. If you take them and then you move them, sure, some of them will continue to do well, but a percentage of them won't. And the more that you move, the larger the number that don't do well and you move them. Then you have to address all those issues of movement. I like a broad reorganization. The other thing is somebody had written that they do a lot of project management. I myself, one of my jobs is actually installing live statewide driver's license systems, which is huge. I oversee 208 driver's license system, offices, back end, front end, security. These are huge, huge projects. So when you look at something like a systemic reorganization and thinking that we have the time to implement this by next year, I think is really, it might look good on paper. When the rubber hits the road, projects like of that magnitude rarely go well. I think also disrupting every single family and every single child is just an enormous ask. And I think the idea is that, well, that's less disruptive if later on we have to close classes and students have to move. I think that disruption is still going to be vastly smaller than just asking absolutely everyone to read it. And a full re-lottery and moving schools and breaking all the communities and the friends and relationships that we've built with parents and that our children have built with their friends. It's just, I'm just flabbergasted that that's, that's even on the table.
Ben.
Thank you, Tori. A couple of quick points or thoughts. Choice is one of the things that defines who we are as a district. It was the choice of Conant that our family made in sending our son there. At the same time, I look at the alignment of the 4 different options and what aligns best with the district. As that slide, if you could put it back up, please, Peter. Yes, that's the one. As we can see, options 4 and 5B2 are pretty much what align best within the priorities of our district. I think when it comes down to brass tacks, those are the 2 options that we need to look at. Option 3V2, I don't think would benefit the district, and I think 6 would be too disruptive as a whole, and that's my personal thoughts. Thank you.
Yenshin.
Thank you. So I have a comment and a question. I really want to acknowledge that I think everyone who's sitting here, everyone who's sitting in front of their YouTube streaming right now, for the parents, families in this district and statewide or nationwide, the past 5 years is has been very disruptive. I think just in our district, we had every single school had change of principals. A couple of them had interim for a few years. I think right now is probably the majority of families thinking we're finally settling down. Oh, we're not. There's a lot of fear. And I remember Peter once said that some of the emails are kind of emotional, but I remember you used to say that they're just caring about their kids loudly, so they're yelling. That's my comment. My question is, I think myself included, even though I won't have an elementary school student at the end of this year, I think the anxiety over what would the schools look like for 5V2. I don't know if everybody else knows, but I think everybody here knows that with the teachers, there's a bumping system. So we don't really know which teacher will stay, which teacher will go. We don't know the administrators, like the principals, who's staying, who's going. What would schools look like? What would, I'm sending my children to a school. Who will the principal be? Maybe I don't know who the teachers will be, but who the principals will be. That will cause a lot of anxiety. I know it's not a question you're ready to answer right now, but I hope that we can have some information on that, say on the 8th of January. Is that reasonable?
We will not have any staffing information about who people can be, because a lot of that's personnel related. So that really, the personnel side of it can't be part of a broader decision-making process.
Adam?
Thank you. I have a couple questions, and I think most of these questions are to sort of think about and come back on the 8th or the 22nd for the administration to sort of share with us. And I think, Peter, you alluded to a bit, and maybe Gabby, you'll include this in your presentation, but as you look at 5V2, where you've got a K3 and a 4-6, they're different sized programs. And so I guess what I would like to see or like to sort of have some discussion of what happens as a bubble moves through that building, because you do have separate principals, you do have separate supervision. Hopefully you have a unified schedule, but I would like to know sort of from an administrative and teaching and learning perspective, what does it look like when a bubble goes through a school like that? The other area I'd like some clarity on, Peter, and I think this is on the agenda for the 8th as well, is around the special education programs, really around where does the responsibility lie in terms of creating those programs, deciding where those programs get placed, and how that decision-making, depending on who owns it, how that decision-making process gets made through this reorganization. And then the last question I have is, particularly in the systemic reorganization options, we say that Blanchard remains mainly untouched, but I'm curious what there might be for options around or what direction you might need from us with regards to how Blanchard may be revisioning what they do as well to sort of go through that systemic reorganization with the rest of the community. So those are my questions sort of for the future. The comments I have, the first is for us as a committee as we're considering this. I think we all need to sort of take into account what our biases are, what schools did or did not, what schools did or do our kids go to now, what elementary schools did we go through, do we have kids in schools, do we remember what it was like, and thanks to Tori for bringing up the dignity index, because, we each sort of feel strongly about the community that we're in, but how are we considering sort of the views of those other communities? So I think everyone around this table has been through this system in some way, shape, or form. And so I think it's important for us to just sort of remember, while our perspective is important and it's what makes us who we are considering the perspectives of the rest of the groups? And then the last thing that I just sort of want to highlight, which was an outcome from the steering committee work, was that there were a number of folks in the steering committee who had been part of the remote learning program during the pandemic. And one of the things that they highlighted, so there's a couple things that I think we should highlight about this. First of all, we were in a very sort of uncertain and crazy time, and we were able to actually spin up a whole new school building, a whole new school program in a very short amount of time, and enroll, a significant number of our students in that program. And on top of that, those people who were involved in that program had a very strong sense of identity. They all came together and created what that school was and what it meant to them in that short period of time. And there, I'm sure, plenty of people in the room tonight and in the community at large who remember sort of the magic of that. So, one of the things that I think we want to start shifting towards is, the outcome is going to be the outcome, but what are going to be some of the great things that we can get from this? And I take solace in the fact that, remote learning program is a really great example of something we've done here with a lot of the staff and the people who exist here today that had a great outcome. And then my last thing is I just want to sort of recognize that for the committee and the community as a whole, like, we are dealing with just so much uncertainty right now, and that is emotionally draining and taxing on all of us. And it's everything from, our own personal paychecks and lifestyle to what our kids are doing, to what's happening in the Commonwealth where they're, receiving less funds and looking at tighter budgets, to what we're seeing nationally. So again, I think, just recognizing that this is one part of a much broader sense of uncertainty in the community that affects us all.
Leela.
Yeah, I just wanted to start by thanking folks who worked on all of the materials for this packet. It's yet another large packet with a lot of work. And then I just wanted to ask kind of a more targeted question about the geography-based student placement. Thank you for sharing some kind of models. It makes me think about the way that school funding right now in the Commonwealth is inequitable, just based on like where people live and inequities in wealth. And I was wondering if you have any preliminary thinking about how that might inequitably impact school buildings and who makes up a school building. I was trying to look at some maps online about like where our wealth lies, and it might be interesting.
Yeah, your thinking is aligned similar to ours. I think a couple things. One is, regardless of where our schools were located, and I'll get to that in a moment, one of the big pieces that we think about is, as we think about zones, how do we incorporate the appropriate mixture of different types of housing, knowing that different types of housing sometimes are sort of associated with different types of sort of housing security, stability, movement. So we clearly, as a community, have sort of very affluent areas and homes, and we also have affordable housing, apartments, rentals, ownerships, things like that, concentrations. So I think one of the things that we would work with the organization that we can find is to say this is an area of priority in terms of how do we ensure an appropriate level of mixture regarding that. I think to that end, what's also helpful is where we physically have our schools does not speak to quote unquote neighborhood schools, right? They're within sort of close proximity to each other. So the degree to which I think that gives us the freedom to actually create sort of zones, not necessarily based on neighborhood, but based on how we want to organize the communities to have that appropriate balance, both by class size and by demographic, I think gives us additional freedom and flexibility in that regard, if that makes sense.
Lakshmi.
Thanks to Peter. I think that the slides were extremely helpful in summarizing in a very concise but comprehensive way. And thanks to Adam and Tori for, I think you expressed what I think I would have, probably not that well. Going back to why I am on school committee, I think I wanted to help to see if I could help move the school and the education system in the direction meant for future. And I feel like this was the opportunity whether it was meant to be that we are going in that direction, and I think the data presents itself. My kids are grown. I have gone through the system 12 plus 12. I have 2 kids. My older son is 30. Both of them have started with kindergarten and done with high school, graduated. So I see a lot of concerned parents about change, disruption. If I look back at what impacted my kids the most, it is the classroom teacher and their friends. Nothing else mattered. The buildings didn't matter. The buses didn't matter. Yes, short term it did, but in the long term, no. So what they walked away with is a summary of the experiences they had, and I think if we look at it from that angle, I think we should look at it as maintaining the school system for future generations that are sustainable, that's with a sustainable organization. And I think if we can leave the emotion out, in the long term, they will work out. And if we can get great teachers in the classrooms, I think that's all that matters. Thank you.
I want to echo that point in particular, because I really do think that everyone here in this room remembers at least one educator in their life that made an impact on them. And so I do agree that giving the educators the resources and the conditions that they need to do their job well and effectively, that's one of my top priorities in my brain as I'm navigating throughout this. I have a couple of thoughts, but I do want to start off with, I do think it is important that we continue to set a good example of how we navigate big, tough decisions, because if we want to walk the walk here, I think just being able to demonstrate that, like, it is okay to disagree intensely and, like, not be at each other's throats at the whole thing. So hopefully we can continue to demonstrate that, because our students look to us for example. With that in mind, I do personally think this would be my hope. I do hope by the end of this meeting tonight, we do take at least one option off of the table. My read from reading the emails and seeing community input is that it looks like the biggest fault line or the most intense area of disagreement is perhaps between options 4 and 5. And so therefore, I think that is where we should spend the majority of our focus on discerning in this input. So I would like us to seriously consider removing either option 6 and option 3 tonight, perhaps even both. That part I'm not totally fixed on, but I do think that is worthy of our serious consideration. And the last point I do want to make, I would like to say I do gently disagree with my good friend Vikram regarding about how the disruption can be sort of distributed, because I do think that it is really important that we do everything we can as a committee to not exacerbate conditions that cultivate any semblance of resentment or like segmented. It is hard not to feel as a parent with the child in the community. I totally get why you can feel singled out throughout all this. And I do think that emphasizing the need for like a community-wide lift about being able to create a more systemic distribution of the change that we're all going to have to collectively absorb anyway, I do think that will be the best way for us to cultivate the conditions where we can build the community that helps us navigate this forward. That is a better scenario in my brain than like segmenting, like, okay, here's the change, it's going to be over there. That might feel more, what's the word? It might feel more digestible in the short term, but I do think for like a few years out, that the more I personally am leaning much more towards the system-wide approach, but I would like to hear the best case possible for the other option. That's why we're doing this. And those are my main points. And I guess the very last question I do have for Peter, is it safe to say that with the grade banding model of option 5, with the more efficient allocation of resources, of being able to target more specific portions of the student population, like, is it fair to say that with that particular model that is not found in options 3 or 4, that there may be a better, literacy rates may be better than they otherwise would not have? Because you can target the kids more? Or is it, perhaps it's more nuanced than that, but.
I'll ask Gabby to weigh in maybe as well. I'm personally not sure. Just looking at literacy rates, I think it would be hard to make any promise around any one model targeting that. I think overall, we feel as though we can more effectively reach more students with the existing resources, especially if they become more constrained, if we have more classrooms at a grade level. I think in that regard, both options 5 and 6 get there. I think the only reason that we are cautious about 6 is we think there's another trade-off that may be less palatable to the community. So, but in terms of actual like student outcomes, I think we feel like we can serve our students better in both 5 and 6, particularly in a period of limited resources. Gabby, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Is it this one? Yep. It's on. Thanks for your question, Glenn. I don't really have anything else to add. I think that our hope and our focused efforts have certainly been energized around early literacy, and I would say that we're hoping to see student literacy rates continue to improve because of this incredible commitment and hard work that's happening within all of our schools to always look at data and to always target improvement. We do think the efficiencies could be streamlined a little bit better in a Model 5 or 6, but the educators are working really, really hard. So it would be really hard for us to say what is the exact cause if we're seeing one way or the other. So I do appreciate the question.
Thank you for that. That's basically all I had.
Lisa.
I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that I understand how hard this is, and especially, again, many of us, parents and, having kids, whether they're young or they're old, and you think about their elementary school experiences, and I think it's difficult because I think they come home and they're always so happy and they tell you about their experiences, and they're always so happy to talk about their teachers and the people that really care about them and make their day. And I think one of the things that I've realized that's so important in all of this is it's just always the people. And when I'm thinking about the people, I'm thinking about how every year after year, they're doing more with less. And I think one of the things I struggle with when I'm thinking about this as a parent is just thinking about how much harder our teachers are working every year to give our kids everything that they possibly can. And I don't think any of this is easy. And I think when we talk about how, removing 11 sections and having to move people around, I just want to make it clear that it's not something that we're discussing lightly, that there is emotion behind it. But, when we're thinking about the great change, I think we're also thinking about the great opportunity. And when I'm thinking about services and I'm thinking about our students who need more, not just the kids going into the classroom and they go in, they go out, but the students who need speech or who need reading specialists, who need a math specialist, who need occupational therapy, physical therapy. There's so many different services that our children need. And when I think about how hard it is to deliver services to those kids, trying every year with all the cuts that we make, doing more with less, I think about the opportunities when we consolidate to have better groups and to optimize our groups. I'll give an example, for a child receiving speech services. Those pairings are so important. When they pull the kids out of the classroom, that time is really valuable. And for any parent that looks at that IEP and looks at the time and fights for that time and is always wanting more time, you know how valuable that time is. And if they're not paired with the appropriate partner, the work doesn't get done as efficiently. It's harder to accomplish what the therapist is trying to do in that setting. If you have more students and you have more sections to pull from, you can better optimize the groups. You can put kids together that are a better match when they're receiving those services. And so it's not just about improving schedules for the people delivering the services, but you're actually giving a better quality experience to the students. And so when I'm thinking about student outcomes, and I'm thinking about at the end of the day, the entire reason I'm here is for our students. When we make hard choices, I think that has to be at the heart of it. And I'm thinking about what our students are going to get at the end of this. And I'm just asking every parent to think about, what if it was your child that needed extra reading support, physical therapy, all of those things. And even if your child doesn't, because we can recognize that not every child does need those things, to think about what it's like to be in a classroom with students who are not receiving the services or not getting enough of what they need, and what that classroom and that classroom community experience looks like when you have children that end up more dysregulated or having a tougher time getting through that day or don't even want to show up to school because it's so hard, and if only they could receive more support. So I just want to throw that out there.
So I mostly have questions. Probably a big surprise here. Peter, you alluded to talking about some of the flexibility over time of some of the scenarios, and I'm thinking that in terms of, can you stress test them? At what point in time, assume that we have kind of the budget shortfalls we've had over the past 5 years. They've been, what, 2 to 3 million every year? Is that about right? So assume that for couple of years. At what point in time do things really start to fall apart? And I'm going to define that as, do we have to start, at what point do things really start to fall apart? Distributing kids across new schools, or not having staff in the places that we need them, whatever that looks like. And then also you talked about what does it look like to be able to expand and contract. So conversely, I'm the optimist. I'm going to believe that at some point in time, we are not going to have a budget shortfall, and we're going to get to add things back in. What does that look like when we can actually add sections? How do we do that? So that was one. Two, I'm wondering in option 5, we've heard a lot about the importance of having older student role models of our book buddies, our star buddies. All of our schools have a program like that right now. What would that look like in 5v2? And what sort of coordination would you expect of the upper and lower schools to be able to make some of those things that I think we consider important continue to exist? And then probably my third one is, kind of taking Yenshin's question maybe a little bit different direction. If we can't talk specific staff, can we talk about process? How are you thinking about the idea of how we might create new schools? And I heard Andrew gave us some homework in there that, school committee, we probably have to figure out what the things are that we think need to be consistent. So, certainly for 4, 5, and 6, we would need to have that conversation because there would be a new school community being created. So that's probably a due out to us, but just curious, once you have that sort of structure from us, what might that look like and what might that timeline be? Okay, so to our crew here, go ahead, Peter. You don't have to answer those right now. That was kind of a next time thought.
We'll take a look at all of that. I mean, I think, in all honesty, like my most flip answer is going to be to when do things fall apart, because I think I'm looking out right now and I think there's a lot of feeling that would have been 3 years ago. And I think we're at a place that we can, and I'll make an initial comment and then we can do some of the work behind the scenes on this. We can reorganize ourselves and take a couple of $1 million off the base budget. The expenses that continue to exist are going to continue to increase at whatever the market rates are for all of those expenses. And so if our personnel costs go up greater than 3% that the community can afford, that's 75 to 80% of our budget. We're going to have a challenge. If our utilities go up greater than 3% a year, which they have over the last few years, we're going to continue to have a problem. If our health insurance goes up in double digits over the next few years, we're going to continue to have a problem. There's no way to create a reorganization scenario that eliminates those cost centers. It's just not realistic. I think, we are taking this work on seriously because we recognize that we can make potentially more efficient use of our resources in our staff time, our school buildings, and everything else that considers the changes in enrollment that we've had. And I think we need to be super clear with the community that making this one-time change is not a long-term. This doesn't solve the budgets for the communities. And if the communities are going to want to continue to have strong schools, at some point we're going to have to fund the schools that we're doing. And I recognize that for many in our community, there's a real tension. They're passionate about schools and they care deeply, and they're at their limit for what people can afford in their own homes. And I absolutely understand that. I think one of the most frustrating things for all of our staff is that none of our staff can solve that problem. It's not a staff level problem that can be solved. It's only a community-wide problem around how we fund things. And quite honestly, I think a lot of the work that many of you have been doing around trying to advocate more at the state level for increased funding is really a testament to thinking that it's not even just a community problem. So, I think my initial gut reaction is I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver that reorganizing our schools means we fixed revenue problems, because we have a revenue problem. Revenue is not keeping up with expenses. And that is just the reality of schools everywhere right now. And I also believe firmly that you need to do whatever you can control in the moment. And how we're choosing to organize ourselves and how we're choosing to work within the resources we have is what we can control right now, even though we can't control the big revenue picture. But that needs to be a serious conversation, I think, going down the road. But, to recap, we will work on these and come back with some more detail for you at the next meeting.
So you actually just hit on why I asked that question. So I sit on Acton Leadership Group. This is my third year going through this, and we have conversations with the town about how we bring to town meeting a budget that works for both town and the school. Our Boxborough members do a similar type of thing. And I will tell you that I am thinking about, going in at some point in time and needing to have this very conversation that we need to fund our schools. And if we have not made a good choice now, and people look at us and go, you didn't go big when you could have, and you didn't do the thing that is most sustainable, that becomes a really hard conversation. So that's knocking around in my back of my head, but thank you for stating that more eloquently. Okay, so what do we want to do for this next round? Do we want to look at trying to narrow this down, knowing that what that might do is help the administration out a little bit more, or do we feel like we need to have more conversation? So let me get just kind of a show of hands of how many people would like to whittle things down a bit. Okay, anybody think they need some more time on this? Abstentions are allowed. This isn't an actual vote. Okay. So I guess we should entertain that conversation so we can move this along. Glenn, go ahead.
With that in mind, I make a motion to remove option 6 and option 3 from further consideration.
I second that.
All right, so that was moved by Glenn, removing 6 and 3 from further consideration, and seconded by Vikram. Let's have some discussion. Adam.
I like this idea, and I think that we should move forward with this quickly because this is now not the most pressing decision we need to make. There are some really interesting decisions we need to make around enrollment policy, and I didn't hear any of us really dive into that, myself included, and I think that that's sort of the next conversation that we need to air out and probably get more input from the community on as well.
Yenshin.
Thank you, Tori. I recognize I probably was the only one who didn't raise my hand. I'm having a really hard time I don't have a problem with removing 3B2, but I'm looking at option 4. That still leaves the option that we will close 2 schools and moving 1 school into the building. I don't know how much that's going to do to reduce, in terms of reducing tension in the community or hurt and harm. This is our last meeting in 2025. I don't know if I can do that.
Lisa.
I would be in favor of removing options 3 and 4.
So the motion that is on the table right now is to remove 6 and 3. This is what we are discussing. And anybody else want to discuss this before we complicate things?
But can I make
Lakshmi.
a friendly amendment? Or does it work that way?
Lisa, let's let Lakshmi address this one, and then we'll venture into friendly amendments.
What are we trying to accomplish by eliminating the options? I think we should put it on the table. I think that will be very clear.
Was that a motion to lay this on the table?
No, just a question.
Oh, you want to know why we're doing it? So at the moment, every time we ask questions, we're asking our administration to prepare 4 different versions. If we've reached the point that we're like, we know that we're not really leaning towards some of these, we should probably just take those out of the conversation. Vikram.
I think 3 should have been off the table a long time ago. I think that was initially what was going to happen. It was an after 10 p.m. vote. It's not been fair to Miriam. I think everybody's in agreement about that. And 6, clearly the data shows that having humongous schools is not an option that anybody favors, if that helps answer those questions.
Lisa?
I would like to make a friendly amendment to remove options 3 and 4 instead of 3 and 6. Can I do that? Or no? Or it doesn't work?
So,
That's not how the friendly amendment works. I'm still learning, guys, so I'm new.
The originator of the motion would have to accept it, as would the person who seconded.
Oh.
With as much grace and compassion as I can possibly muster. I very gently do not accept the friendly amendment, but I know you're very friendly. So
That was like an 8 on the dignity index, I just want to say that.
Okay, so here's the other thing I will mention. Do we want to listen to public comment before we vote on things? Okay.
I think that'd be a good idea.
So let me finish my thought and then I'll come to you. We could lay this on the table. We could bring up anything else that we want to discuss. We could lay that on the table. Then we could have public comment. Does that sound reasonable? Okay, Yenshin had her hand up first.
I was just going to make a friendly amendment to just to remove option 6. I can, but it's up to you whether you want to accept or not.
Do you mean remove it from the thing to be removed or remove it in and of itself?
Remove option 6 from only.
With as much grace and friendliness as I can possibly muster, with a 12,000 on the dignity scale, I do not accept the friendly amendment, but I know you're super duper friendly.
Okay.
Adam.
Yeah, I would actually like us to vote on this before we go to public comment, because I think that I would like to hear targeted feedback from the community on what remains and also on enrollment options. So I think that will help focus sort of what we're getting from folks during public participation.
Okay, Lakshmi?
Okay.
Hello.
I think putting 2 on the table is a difficult choice for us to vote on and agree on anything. I think maybe 1 at a time.
Is that a third?
Yeah.
Is that a third friendly amendment?
Yep.
I don't know how much friendly I have left. Well, I have a lot left. With as much grace and compassion as I can muster, knowing that you're the most friendliest person ever that's ever seated to my right, I do not accept the friendly amendment.
Lisa?
Can I make a statement for consideration or make a comment in regards to his motion?
Yes, as long as we're talking about the motion under discussion.
We're talking
Yes.
about the motion under discussion. I say this in the friendliest of friendly manners possible, to the friendliest degree, that I do feel that options 3 and 4 are continuing to pit communities against each other, and I'm feeling that I would like to put an end to that. So those are my feelings around those two, and I also just want to take a moment to recognize that both of those options don't feel great for our community, options 3 and 4. And my reason for requesting the friendly amendment earlier was just so we could take the divisiveness out of the community and then focus on the enrollment piece. So that was just my comment in regards to his motion.
So I think there's also something worth thinking about. We're talking about 4 options that split pretty neatly into 2 different types. Have we had enough discussion to be able to decide that we are committing to one approach over the other? Because I think the benefit of what Glenn has proposed here is that we can still continue to have those conversations. I'm going to acknowledge the tension piece. I get that. And I think that's what makes it so complicated, and I think we need to look through it carefully before we make a quick decision. As much as I really would love to be through the painful part, it's going to be painful any way we look at it. Anybody else? Adam?
I'm just brushing up on Robert's rules.
Yep.
So if we're not ready to vote, then someone can make a motion to lay this on the table. That would be seconded and voted upon.
Yep.
So that could be a way to see if the group is ready to vote on this or not.
I move to lay this on the table.
Is there a second? Oh, so we're ready to vote on this. All right. There you go. Well played, Adam, reading up on his rules. All righty. So the motion is to remove options 6 and 3V2. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? 1 opposed. Okay, hang on. I'm taking notes. And any abstentions? Okay, so that passes. In that case, public comment is going to be on what public comment needs to be on. We will, let me ask, does anybody else have anything, any questions we need to pass on to the administration right now? Okay, so Vikram.
I just want to say one thing here, and to everybody in the community here, we have all been paying close attention to this, writing all sorts of letters and lots of communication. And I just want to shine, again, a spotlight on Tori, who has been answering every single one of everyone's emails personally and in depth. Up until, I think, yesterday was virtually impossible for her to do it. She's superhuman, and I just want to call that out.
Thank you. I'm also going to say that we are all going to take a break. Please continue to send emails. We will continue to read them. We're not going to respond over the break. And it is okay for you not to send emails over the break if you don't want to either. So, okay. So let's take a look at that show of hands. How many people now feel like they have things to say? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Okay. We're going to go with 45 seconds. If everyone can make a nice line coming up towards our microphone. And we greatly appreciate everybody honoring the time. It was shown up here on our little iPad, courtesy of Adam. Yeah. So when you come up, just introduce yourselves, please. And yeah, we'll get this going.
Yassine Abou-El-Noor, 66 Robin Street. I am a Conant parent. Option 5V2 with the Conant reassignment option picks Conant, a majority-minority community, as the target of disruption and calls it a reset. The committee's own language promises genuinely newly formed communities and thoughtful blending, but commits to no mechanism to achieve that. Community does dictate culture, and under that enrollment choice, every other community remains intact. Same peer, same building. Merriam loses the name, but only Conant gets scattered. We need a formal commitment from that parents and teachers from host and incoming communities will build together. Otherwise, you're making refugees of a majority-minority community. You're outvoting us to keep the peace, and you're asking us to assimilate quietly. Thank you.
Lena Badra, 66 Robin Street. The need for district reorganization is not a Conant-only problem. The district school budget shortfall is not a Conant-only problem. Option 5V2 is presented as an equitable option to have a shared experience to build new communities and drive a collective redesign of our schools and embedded cultures. The reassignment of only Conant students does not align with the notion that this is an equitable experience. Do not distribute only Conant students to solve a district-wide issue. The same level of distaste for this enrollment option should exist as it does for the distaste of options 3 and 4. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank committee for your work and dedication. Thank you so much. I moved to town 25 years ago after looking at the statewide rating for the schools, and I think that Conant ranked 33rd place in state and award-winning school. You should try to preserve the name, preserve the culture of a school, and try to maintain a ranking for the town across the state. That basically what's valued for the town, what's allow town to collect higher taxes, maintain high property values. So I think it minimizes disruption, minimize the risk, try to preserve the town ranking school system, which is very highly ranked, like in the upper 1% in the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you introduce yourself, please? Yeah. Just so we get.
What was that?
We didn't get your name.
My name is Alexei Lomakin.
Super. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please introduce yourselves as you come up. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jacob McCrindle. I'm a new Conant parent. What I want to just address is with option 5V2, I'm concerned how much steam it has gathered in such a short period of time. I did notice that at the steering committee meeting, how it was proposed, it was the only option that Superintendent Light actually proposed in that first round vote as even being moved forward for consideration. And it seems to have gathered a great amount of steam without a lot of public comment, so I'm glad we're having that discussion here now. I think that it is not lost on the Conant parents that it is a more opaque version to eliminate Conant when you have that third option where it's saying just eliminate Conant and scatter it across the district. I suggest that in option 4, that really allows the community an opportunity to preserve what is the best about this school district and what has made it a shining example of what public education can and should be. And I would implore this committee to give serious consideration to option 4.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mara Epstein. Today I read excerpts from a letter signed by 50 members of the Merriam community that also align with the petition submitted last week to the school committee that was signed by 185 Acton-Boxborough community members. As community members deeply concerned about the impact of the proposed reorganization on students and communities, we urge the school committee to support option 5V2. Based on the district's data, option 4 does not offer the long-term educationally sound solution our community needs. Closing and dispersing both McT and Merriam will cause irreparable harm and divisiveness in our communities by clearly prioritizing one community over the 2 existing Parker-Damon schools. We also remain concerned about how data were used to justify Merriam's selection for elimination, avoiding ranked choice trends showing Merriam as a stable middle-of-the-pack choice for many years. Lastly, we ask that the school committee retains the innovative models of education that Merriam has, including looping, project-based learning, student-led conferences, in whatever form our schools take next. Just lastly, please remember we are a top-performing school district because of our amazing educators, our teachers, staff, and administrators who have been treated like a line item on a budget.
Thank you.
They deserve their respect and to be treated better throughout this process.
Hi, my name is Chris LeBlanc, and while I could introduce myself as a Merriam dad, I'll zoom out and simply say we're an AB family. While I'm worried about the kids and the transition and change, I'm becoming much more concerned about the adults, and especially the parents and the divisiveness that this experience has brought. I've witnessed and had to catch myself pitting school against school, and it's really sad. When there's enough heaviness and sadness outside this district, let's choose the option that brings possibility excitement, and above all things, brings us back together. While I'm grieving the loss of the experiences I expected for my kids through Miriam's approaches, and hope some of that could remain, my wife and I are choosing hope and optimism about the opening of a new door versus dwelling on the closed ones. We see that possibility with option 5 too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Karthikeyan Karunanidhi, I go by KK. I've been upset and disappointed by the division and the us versus them mindset that has dominated this process. My family chose Acton and the school district after more than 3 years of research. In our first year here, we were asked to support a tax override, and despite real financial concerns, we voted yes because we believed in the district and in doing what's right for all children. What concerns me now is a process that creates winners and losers, especially through lottery-based enrollment. That is not equitable, and it undermines trust. We should not be designing a system where some families win and others don't. I do not want to see 5v2 be implemented in a manner that really makes it 3v1. I urge the committee to focus on solutions that are physically sustainable, fair to all families, not just the most vocal, and one that ensures every child receives a good education. We need collaboration and compromise, not coalitions protecting individual schools. A win-lose outcome hurts our kids, our district, and the town. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Manaswita. I'm a Conan parent, and my main comment is that I think with all the discussion and the survey and every meeting that we have had, I feel that we have lost the very goal that we are trying to achieve with this restructuring, and it might help everyone in the community, especially the elementary parents community, to revisit what we are trying to do objectively instead of being emotional about it, so that we can come up with a more sustainable model in the long run, because that should probably be the focus, something that is sustainable in the long run.
Thank you.
Hi, Matt Cody. The town already avoided the least disruptive path when dropping 3v1, and option 4 is really just arbitrarily choosing a metric to sacrifice some school communities for another. And option 5 is not about trying to make everyone go through the same thing. It's about everyone working together so that no one has to go through too much on their own. If we choose 4, many of the dispersed students will essentially be isolated and being asked to integrate into already established schools and already deeply established friend groups, and to do so with the knowledge that they're in this position so that a different school can move into Parker-Damon. How much more will this affect their social, emotional, and educational well-being than having all of the kids work together to create a new community, hopefully with many of their current friends if we implement this right, just as we have them do when they go into 7th grade and 9th grade.
Thank you.
Hi, Molly Sparrow. So as you've probably seen by now, this process is really tearing us apart in some ways. It's pitted school against school and friend against friend, neighbor against neighbor. This is not a problem that belongs to any one school. It's a district-wide problem. Open enrollment might have worked well in the past, but with the greater costs, that just seems like there's no way we can afford it without disadvantaging a large group of people, which is going to just deepen resentment and impede the process of building new communities in Parker-Damon and Boardwalk. So the only solution that allows us to all work together toward a fresh start is 5v2 with geographic-based enrollment. I hope we can set an example for our children and show them how we can come together and unify to build new communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Melissa Catone, AB family, current Conant family. Our district's equity goals commit us to improving outcomes for all students, as well as those that are disadvantaged and language learners. Currently at Conant, students feel safe coming to school, and I know we need to make a systemic change now. However, the draft enrollment policy for option 5 that dissolves and assimilates Conant into a largely pre-existing communities runs counter to the stated intent of option 5 to build a new community. Whichever new model is chosen, integration is required, and it must be done with a deliberate process to protect safety, trust, equity, and outcomes for both our disadvantaged learners and all students. This is not only in the best interest of one school or some schools, but the best interest of our community at large. Let's build a stronger community together that makes the best of what's working and continue to foster students' growth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vishal. I'm first-time Conan parent.
I'm worried about the implementation of option 5V2 with the choice of distributing Conant kits only. It's no different than option 3V1, which was rejected by the steering committee because it was not equitable and targeting one community unfairly. If our goal is to create a new community, it should be a burden of entire district and not just one community to make the district financially sustainable. So with that, if we are creating a new community with option 5V2, we should consider a geography-based enrollment, and in that way, all children will be displaced, but it's a one-time pain, and it will be easier for everybody to go through that and create new bonds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Andrea Drowis. I'm a mom of two at Conant. And I want to thank you for your comments. And I really, what Lisa said about elementary school kids coming home and being happy, I think we need to consider the kids that don't get to come home and be happy. The kids that can't move 11 times and be okay. The kids that, sorry, I can't see your name, I can't see that far, but you mentioned friends and teachers, the kids that struggle with friends. At Conant, we're already losing our school, the building, and the building is important. Conant, what I think has been left out of this conversation, houses the Connections program. So you have the kids who biologically inherently struggle with change housed in the school that are going to endure that change. So we need to create new committees. I only have 3 seconds left. So the way to do that is to start fresh and have geographical enrollment so that everyone is starting new, so that the town can really do what it says it's going to do and be inclusive and create these new communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amrita. I'm a current Conant parent. First of all, thanks everyone for making time tonight and coming to talk to this. The reorganization plan has a critical gap. What teaching method will the new schools use? The school committee should think strategically about building a unified culture and teaching methodology that will help all AB elementary students excel. We have an opportunity to create a foundation that makes AB elementary schools consistently desired and high-performing across the state. I think having one proven approach, one culture of excellence across both campuses will ensure every AB child receives the same high-quality education regardless of which school they attend. So by Jan 22nd, it will be great if you can clarify what is the teaching model that we will adopt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Andrea Blades. My kids go to Douglas. I think there's so much, like I don't disagree actually with almost anything that I've heard today. And I think that what we're all feeling is that this is a very difficult situation and it is being rushed. And I actually applaud some of the courage that I think we heard from Vikram. I feel like there are voices that we're not hearing. And, it's easy to like pit a new voice as one against the other. And I understand why parents feel that way. From a Douglas Gates perspective, we're just coming into this conversation and starting to understand what the proposal is. And so now it feels like we're attacking others at our own expense. I think that we need to hear all voices and we need to allow some time for that. This is rushed. This is happening too quickly. And it feels irresponsible.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Arnon. I'm a Mikti father. I'm actually going to continue with the line of the previous speaker. I do think this is very rushed, especially drastic change like option 5.2. I think a lot of the reason why being rushed is this looming budget deficit of next year. And for that reason, myself and a few other parents are brainstorming about ways to generate revenue quickly enough to buy us time to make this a much more considerable decision, to think about more options maybe. We're going to have a Zoom call tomorrow morning to brainstorm these options. If you're interested, email me. It's arnonar@yahoo.com, so arnonar@yahoo.com. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Jasmine Koo. I'm a Merriam parent. I think first I would second that feeling of this being rushed and anything that, could postpone this until, maybe some other options could be considered. But in addition to that, I would just like to piggyback on the comments about the divisiveness. And any approach that is a targeted approach, and I know, Peter Light, you said it's not targeting individuals, but we should just call a spade, and it is. That's what it feels like. And I think taking any approach that targets a particular population, we need to consider what that says to that student population, whether that be Conant or Merriam or McCarthy Town. And then secondly, for a 5v2 model, I would just implore everybody to consider rising sixth graders who are current fifth graders. Those were COVID kindergartners who had a tough transition, are now going to have another transition, and then have another transition going into seventh grade. And so whatever you can do to keep those cohorts together, I think you should make a commitment to do that with any option.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sirisha Kandula, and I'm a Conant parent. I have a problem with calling 5e2 choice 1, that it's not systemic. I think it is targeted disruption. It is only impacting Conant kids. I do think we should pick the more fiscally responsible choice, that is 5e2, and geographic assignment, because I think that will truly give us an opportunity to arrange the schools, bring them together in a more unified fashion, and it will also help with our busing situation and probably help save some transportation costs as well. I think most of the country uses this neighborhood as assignment, so there must be something good in that, right? When pretty much every town in the country uses that kind of policy. So yeah, and I'm also disappointed that we are again here despite passing the tax override. So I want us to pick a solution that we are not again doing this 1 or 2 years down the lane. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Maren Gulliver, and I'm speaking today as a community member, an AB alum, and the parent of 2 young children. I also work for the district as a K-6 literacy coach at Conant and Blanchard. I'm going to skip the middle part of my remarks, which is saying great things about Conant, Blanchard, Merriam, where I went, and Carol Hubner, which are all awesome. Skip now to the next point. This is about people. And most importantly in all of this, it's about the little people. It's the time that we truly live our values of equity and move towards an equitable school model for the future. I ask that we strongly consider taking individual schools out of the equation and move forward together with geography-based schools that prioritize high-quality education for all students. The open enrollment model is no longer serving our community in a feasible or equitable way. It's time that we shift from this model and build schools from the ground up that are designed to work together and not compete for enrollment. Let's shift our thinking as a community from how much we love our children's schools, because they are wonderful, to how we can build something together for the entire community. While I personally really wanted the opportunity to choose where my rising kindergartner would attend elementary school, I recognize that this model is not equitable, it does not support all students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Kate, and I'm just a parent. I hope that this whole process ends up in a future that doesn't put anybody in this situation ever again. That is my ultimate goal for this. I will say, however, that I feel like the redistribution is now the main thing that everybody's going to have to talk about. And I really would like to urge you all to redistribute or scatter people across the globe with everybody being reassigned. I don't think it's fair for one community to suffer the ultimate shame, or not shame, but decision of being not the most important, and that the people who feel it's a community problem and it should be a community solution, so everybody should have to suffer or go through the new changes.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Katie Paquin, and I'm a little nervous. I want to thank you for your thoughtfulness, dedication, and service to our schools. I'm very appreciative of your work. This is hard, and I appreciate all of you. I want to thank everyone here, because this is also hard for you. I'm a mom of a fourth grader who recently found out by his peers that the Conant building is closed and asked me if he could bring home a piece of the building as a memento for himself. Okay, so I'm reminding you that there's our kids out there. They're creating their own narrative about what's going on. And this is happening. And we don't want to target these kids. We all want our kids to have friends at their school. Maybe not in their classroom, because that's a little disruptive sometimes, but at their school. So I'm asking you to please consider that many hands make light work. This is a community problem. We need to spread this out as a community. Geo enrollment, please.
Thank you.
Anthony Rambo, father of 3, 2 at Conant, 4th and 6th grade. As for everybody here involved, this is very personal, but we live on Minded Ave, walking distance to Conant, and we actually on Fridays have a 4th and 6th grade, now 4th and 6th grade service squad. The Acton Kids Service Squad is at our house, and we take 17 kids home. So this is just really hard that Conant building is closing. My heart was like, keep it together, the Conant community, wherever it goes. Through this process, though, I have changed, and my head is telling me we need to do what's right for and sustainable for the community. Because 2 years ago, I had to sit my children down who were in 4th and 2nd grade and tell them, no, it's okay. We're going to just, vote on something. No, your school is not being displaced or disbanded. You're okay. We need to think about 2 years from now, right? We can't keep doing this. And I think it's a really cool opportunity for us as a district to do the right thing for everybody and not just a group of people. I think we really need to step back and think about how do we put the district on a better fiscally responsible, That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Leah Lally, Miriam. I urge you to vote against any proposal that would replace one school at the expense of another. Simply introducing this option has already caused harm, and keeping it on the table risks further division within our district. The idea that one school could be singled out sends a damaging message, especially to students, or 2 schools or 3 schools. When children hear their school might be the one to go, it affects their sense of worth and belonging. All students deserve to feel equally valued and proud of their school. The school committee has an opportunity to affirm their commitment to equity and belonging for every school community and all of the students at AB. We hope you do that.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shauna Seidenberg. I'm a mom, Douglas mom. It's clear that there's an idea that parents here are here to protect individual schools over everything, and that has not been my experience and isn't my viewpoint as a Douglas parent. There are plenty of us who are interested in protecting the experience of the most kids possible over everything, period. So I urge you to focus on displacing the least amount of children possible as a main priority. The truth is that integrating displaced kids into an already established school isn't objectively a bad thing, like it's being framed here. Entering kids into a stable environment rather than one that's been completely upended for everyone has the potential to be a very positive thing. Removing open enrollment is also not just a question of equity, it's a complete philosophical change, and we need to fully vet that before we do that together. Look at it from every angle, every pro, every con. Lastly, sorry, it seems there's an idea that there's going to be more resentment around targeted disruption versus systemic, and I would argue that that is absolutely not true. Expanding the amount of folks who are displaced will expand resentment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Sharon Chayton Pollock. I'm a mother of 2 Conant 4th graders. I agree with essentially what most of the Conant parents have said, but out of left field, I'd like to urge you to consider consulting with the kids somehow. They do know now that change is coming. They don't understand what is going on right now. We can't explain all the options to them previously, but now that the options are down to just a couple, perhaps it would be nice to elicit comments from them in whatever way would open the smallest can of worms possible for the district, and let them feel that they have some kind of a voice, or at least that someone cares to explain to them what is happening, so that they don't feel completely disenfranchised and so they feel some agency in this. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for your time. My name is Brittany. My son just entered into kindergarten this year. He's my first child going into kindergarten. We did the tour of all the schools. We came very quickly to a conclusion that there are basically 2 types of schools. There's 6 different schools, but there's 2 types in Acton. There's a traditional and a sort of more non-traditional approach. I know what people value about Merriam and McCarthy Town is the art integration, the calling teachers by their first names and things like that. And then there are schools that have a more conservative traditional approach. So what am I saying with this? If we do go to option 5v2 model where we have grade banded, we have two options. We can preserve those two different sorts of identities and approaches to education, traditional and non-traditional, and allow kids to choose them. Or we can have a very vanilla approach where we may have children that need a more art integration, non-traditional approach stuck in a school that doesn't suit them because of geography. So I'd urge us against, I'm already over time, aren't I? Okay, thank you, bye.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kendra Wilson, Douglas parent. I noticed that 2 folks tonight on the school committee did not vote, and 2 are also not here. So that's about almost 40% of the school committee did not vote on what took place tonight. I'm wondering what the voting jurisdiction is, policies around this, since nearly 40% didn't get a voice tonight.
If you email us, we can follow up on that. And just to clarify, everybody voted on that. We had no abstentions. So everybody who's present today did.
Every
Thank
single
you.
person voted?
Yes. We had 1 opposed and everybody else was in favor.
What about the people who aren't here?
They're not here.
So they
We
don't
have
get a
quorum.
vote?
Yep. Email me and I'll follow up on that.
Hi, I'm Heather Sheehan. I'm a Douglas mom, Douglas and RJ Gray mom. I think in every model, obviously, there's inherently a ton of change and disruption, and I think we all are well aware that early childhood development supports structure, reliability, predictability, stability for social, emotional well-being, growth, and development. Given how rushed this process is, the lack of real data on financial impact, and an executable timeline by the time school begins in the fall, I would urge the school committee to maintain the reliability, relationships, and structure for our kids to thrive in. A lottery feels reckless, ill-informed, and given recent petitions, a full lottery is not strongly supported by teachers and families alike. Thank you.
Oh, Thank you.
Nailed it.
Hi, I'm Mahalia, she, her. Oh, this is fine. I'm good. Okay. All right, I'm Mahalia, she, her. I'm a parent of a kid in McCarthytown. 3 years ago we moved to Acton, and I didn't even know that pick your own school was an option. I loved McCarthytown, and it was great for Surya as it is, but now that we're talking about a different option, the 5v2 seems like a really great place as far as having experts who are able to make an equitable geographic breakdown. That's not something that I could do by myself by picking it. And it seems like a really great option for making things even or not even, but equitable in a time that everybody's going to have to change in some way or the other. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to note that our line feels like it keeps growing. Could we?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vijaya Meduri. I'm a Conan parent. I am here to pass on a message from a Conan student. None of it is mine. My son, I told my son about the transition, and he said, I want my school to be there, but I want to go to the same school as our neighbor. Ironically, our neighbor is a Miriam family, next door neighbor. So he said, whatever, can you tell the people moving Conant away that I want to go to the same school as our neighbor who's a Miriam, another kid who's a Douglas, another kid who is some other school. I want all my friends and neighbors to be in the same school. It's a message I'm passing on. That's why I'm the last one in the line. My apologies.
Thank you.
So I guess I will be the last one. My name is Shafei. I'm a McCarthy parent. So my family moved to this school district this year, very new, and I have to go through this. So this is a problem, posed to everybody. And I think this is an opportunity for the community to solve this together. That will reflect how we feel in this town, right? I mean, as a parent, I teach my child, when I persuaded them to move here, this is an opportunity for us to learn, to adapt. I think each of us should take this as an opportunity to teach us kids a lesson, to be adaptive. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your really thoughtful comments and for adapting to our figuring out what comments were going to be about. So well done. Very much appreciated. I think we're on subcommittee and member reports. Let's do this by exception. Does anybody have anything hot that we need to report on for policy, budget, or negotiations? Okay.
Just a quick update for budget. We continue to meet and discuss sort of the limited information that we'll be seeing compared to traditional budget workshops. I'm not going to say that the information is limited. The district is working on a myriad of variables for us, but we will see a bottom line budget. We will see some of the major cost codes in the budget workshop, but so much of the budget planning will come after we make our decision on the 22nd. There's not enough time between the 22nd and our budget workshop on the 9th to prepare a traditional budget binder. But we've got some good agreements between the budget subcommittee and the administration on what will be prepared for that workshop.
Yenshin.
I don't have anything in relation to subcommittees. Can I bring up liaison? Okay. So I'm currently the Acton Finance Committee liaison, but given my work schedule, I cannot go to the Acton Finance Committee meetings in person. I was wondering if, because Lisa and I had chatted offline, she's interested in attending the meetings, which they don't have anymore this year, but the next one is in January. I'm just wondering, like, would you like to be added on as my alternate, or would you like to take over as a full liaison? Because she's on, since you're on the negotiation committee, I think it would be good for you to be involved. But I know you have little kids, so I don't want to.
No, I'm happy to take that on.
Is that okay?
So we voted that a little while back.
I know.
You're gonna make my Robert's Rules
Sorry.
heads hurt. So we can actually.
I can make a motion to help this out.
That would be helpful. Thank you, Adam.
I would like to move to, let's do this, add Lisa as an alternative as the FinCom liaison to our school committee assignments.
Second.
All right, so it was moved by Adam and seconded by Leela to add Lisa as an alternate FinCom liaison on our subcommittee and liaison assignments. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so that passes. Thank you. That was helpful, Adam. Thank you. Any others? We're briefing by exception. Leela.
I just wanted to mention, as we're talking about kind of our local finances, that Tuesday there was kind of an annual hearing that happens every year for the state to talk about estimated tax revenue to base the next fiscal year budget for the Commonwealth. And just as an FYI, the governor is probably going to release an official budget proposal towards the end of January that the legislature will then wrestle with. As another FYI, there's also a potential ballot question for the fall of next year that wants to lower income tax, which would most certainly impact revenues for the state.
And I'll add, Acton Leadership Group is actually probably in the best place they've been in December for any of the 3 years I've been with it. Certainly, we have about a $500,000 deficit still to cover, but that's a lot less than usually where we are. So that feels like we're on track with what we're thinking budget-wise on the Acton side. I understand it may not be that way on the Boxborough side.
So I'm happy to provide the liaison update for Boxborough Select Board and Finance Committee since I attended both of those. I see you, Kristen. Thank you. The Select Board met first and got their sort of first round budget proposal from the town administrator, which looked to be more positive than we had originally thought. And then that was followed by the Finance Committee meeting earlier this week. And basically, Boxborough is still on the fence about whether or not, and it's not been decided about whether or not they will need an override. And I think really where the conversation lies is how deep are the cuts and is the need for an override this year. That being said, Boxborough has their budget Saturday on December 3rd, so we think we'll get a lot more information by then. And I will share with those two committees in Boxborough, the next opportunity I have, the conversation that I've had with the administration, which is until we get a really solid sense of what's happening in Boxborough, we're not asking the school administration to plan anything around a B budget because it's pretty disruptive to have to plan for that. And then there's a big difference between planning for a 2% assessment to Boxborough versus a 5% assessment to Boxborough. So at this point, we're still waiting to see. It's not completely off the table, an override in Boxborough, but the depth and need of that may be evolving as Boxborough continues to move through their budget process.
Vikram.
Just a question for Adam. Now that the numbers here seem fairly solid across the obviously now the remaining 2 choices, but formerly the 4 as far as the finance committee is aware, does that inform them to a larger degree to which way they're going to go? Does it sort of like narrow down where they're going to land?
No. So we're a pretty stable number in their planning. There's the municipal side of their budget that they're still working on. What they know is what we've shared with the administration, which is to target about a 3.8% budget increase for next year for the district, and we know what that calculates out to for an assessment for Boxborough. And plus or minus 0.5% is probably where we'll land with that once the budgets from our side get voted. It's really how Boxborough prepares the rest of their municipal budget side and what headroom that gives them with regards to levy limit and revenues for next year. So we have fairly open lines of communication, and so we'll continue to evolve that as the Boxborough municipal side gets more solid.
Thank you.
Lisa.
Oh, just a quick note that Joint PTSO is on recess until February, and we'll be meeting back together then, so there won't be any further updates until then. They're still thinking about planning a spring event, and I do have a CPAC update if that's okay. Last night, CPAC met in person for a little winter gathering. It was very nice. There were cookies, there were treats. Something that I just wanted to bring up that's really important that they're rolling out as of this week, hot off the press. They're bringing back a wraparound coordinator to help refer parents to other specialists. They're not providing any therapeutic services, but it's just going to serve as a referral service for parents needing something extra.
Great. All right. I think we can probably skip the goal update, given that we just really focused hard on AB Forward, which is a big piece of that. Let's get the consent agenda here. Items on the consent agenda do not usually require discussion and are approved with one vote unless any member would like to hold an item for discussion in a separate vote. I will read each item, and if a member would like it held, please say hold. Members do not have to have attended a meeting to vote on the minutes. Item A, approval of the ABRSC meeting minutes from 12/4/25. Item B, approval of strategic planning and reorganization steering committee minutes 12/2/25. Item C, Friends of Acton Library's $24,000 donation to Acton-Boxborough Regional School District. Yeah, you can applaud for that one. Item D, approval of warrants is presented in the packet, 12/18/25.
Move to approve with gratitude.
Yes. That was moved by Leela, seconded by Adam. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you, Ben. All right, that motion passes. Nothing in the FYI, says
Move
Peter.
to adjourn.
Leela.
Second.
All right, moved by Leela, seconded by Adam. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Thank you, everybody, for being here
Thank you,
tonight.
everyone.